So we're going to talk about Bach today, and I don't know a lot about Bach, but I've learned a little bit over the last 24 hours, and pretty interesting guy. And then we're going to have a little show and tell. So here we go. Before we get going, please don't call me a Scrooge. But Christmas has a way of wrapping the gospel that we just heard in nostalgia. But if you read it on a hot July afternoon, like I did yesterday, you'll probably notice some different things, new details that will surprise you, just as I did. And like many of you, I almost know that passage that we just heard by heart. We can imagine the shepherds keeping watch over their flocks at night. It reminds us of Christmas, and it makes us feel good. And that's great. So I'm not a Scrooge. But yesterday, I found myself slowing down a bit instead of rushing toward the familiar ending. Luke tells us that an angel appears to the shepherds with astonishing news. Do not be afraid, for see, I am bringing you good news of great joy for all the people. Angel's proclamation isn't a pious speech or a theological treatise or explanation or some kind of divine debate about the mystery of the incarnation. It is much simpler. It's a choir. It's a chorus. And yesterday, as I was jotting down my thoughts for today, I walked from my office over here over to New St. Mary's, where I like to go and hide sometimes, up in the choir loft. And as I made my way up the stairs, in that moment, I remembered something that I'd forgotten for quite a while. 31 years ago, on a snowy evening, February 22nd to be precise, of 1995, I was a 7th grade boy at St. Christopher's School. Our middle school boy choir and the upper school glee club sang a Bach cantata from the very choir loft where I go to hide these days as a priest of the church. And our director, Hope Erb, some of you may know that name, handed a group of 12 and 13-year-old boys a Bach cantata. None of us spoke German. And she basically said, "You're going to sing this." She was tough, so we followed her lead. And we did on February 22nd of 1995. And in fact, I was talking to Kitty earlier today. I found the newsletter from February of that year, and I didn't see any photos or anything, but I do see it on the calendar, so it's true. I imagine that I am not the only one to say that middle school was not a fun time for me. I had braces. I had a pound of metal in my mouth. I was goofy looking, and my voice shifted from soprano to alto to bass, and then back to, it was a rough time. And I certainly at that point didn't understand Bach's harmonic genius. I was just singing what I was learning from my choir director. But something happened to me that night, here at St. Mary's. Something that mattered deeply, something that shaped my sense of vocation and my love of the church, and particularly this church. Standing up in that choir loft among those voices, I forgot about myself and my braces and my pimples. Thank God. And for a few minutes, I wasn't worrying about how I sounded or I looked. I was simply caught up and completely immersed in something that was far greater than just me. And that is exactly what Johann Sebastian Bach, legend and all, who we remember today, hoped his music would do. Because he never believed his music was supposed to be about Johann Sebastian Bach. And he wasn't writing his works for the canon of music history or for the history books. He was a parish organist and a choir master, like Brian. He was writing stuff for Sunday that has become part of world history. Had no expectation of the fame that would follow. Near the end of many of his manuscripts, he often would write 3 simple letters: S, D, G. Soli Deo Gloria. Soli Deo Gloria. To God alone be the glory. Bach, even a bit of a prima donna, you know, those musician types, he knew he wasn't the subject. He knew it wasn't about him. It was about Christ. It's about Jesus. Jesus was the source and destination of every note that Johann Sebastian Bach ever composed. And that is the secret to his genius. And that is why we remember him today. Because he knew his genius didn't belong to him. It was a gift from God and for God's people to worship God. Bach's theology of worship and song can be heard in the way that he composed his greatest works. And one of his favorite melodic devices was something called a fugue. Have any of y'all ever heard of that? It's a pattern or movement of music that starts with one simple phrase called the subject. And actually, Ed, I'm going to go ahead and cue up that video. And we're going to listen to what that sounds like. And stop at 8 seconds. Here's the subject. Thank you, Ed. Thank you for your patience. Pause. Those few notes are the subject. The other melodic lines that will follow grow directly out of them. Now listen again, starting at 8 seconds. A second voice enters. It's not inventing a completely new melody. It receives the subject and responds to it in the same key. Now a third voice enters. And before long, several independent voices are singing together, in conversation with one another, perfectly harmonized and weaving throughout the score. Thank you, Ed. And they're doing that not because they're singing the same notes, but because they've all received the same subject, the same starting point. What Bach is doing here melodically in a fugue is a powerful illustration of what the church can be when we are at our best. The angel announces, "To you is born this day in the city of David a Savior." That's the subject. The shepherds receive it and become another voice. Mary and Joseph receive it. The early saints of the church receive it. And in the 18th century in Leipzig, Germany, Johann Sebastian Bach received it. And now, 2,000 years later, that same melody is given to all of us. Not to rewrite it, but to receive it and to answer it with our own voices as the church. That's the good news this morning. Jesus has never asked us to compose a new gospel. He calls us, just as he called Bach, to receive it faithfully and carry it out into the life of the world with all our heart. Here's the final point. This is a healing service. Many of us are carrying burdens. Some of us could be thinking, me? Sing? I don't have much of a voice these days. Some of us are carrying grief, illness, loneliness, and exhaustion. And that's okay. And here's why. In choral music, there's a technique called staggered breathing. During a long phrase, no one singer carries the tune. Each breathes at a different moment while people take turns breathing. The music never stops. And it's not because one voice is enough, but because together they all carry the song. Friends, that is the church. That's the work of the church. So whether today you can sing with the angels or barely whisper the words, hold fast to this truth. The song never stops. Not because of you, not because of me, but because Jesus Christ remains the subject, the source, and the very song itself. And to Christ alone be the glory, the power, and the praise, now and forever. Soli Deo Gloria.